Can you get 3 large IPOs through a window where they are literally changing the rules on the stock exchanges, where they're literally changing the rules on the index funds, where they're literally changing the rules at Fidelity in order to allow people to buy this stuff? I mean, is this the last gasp?
Harry, we're back. It's Friday, June 5th. This is our 11th episode, and we're improving our podcast because we've been hearing people like it, but they want to hear more. And we've been consulting our AI agent about how we can make it better. So hopefully you'll see some improvements. And that said, I'm turning it over the cold open to my colleague and partner, Harry. Let's go. What are we going to talk about on this podcast?
Thanks. I think we have a couple of different segments to, really go through here. Let's just start with the obvious one, the IPO window. Anthropic filed, SpaceX is about to go public. Ben Graham said it, Warren Buffett quotes it all the time. Short term, the market is a voting machine. Long term, the market is a weighing machine. And the IPO window is pretty much the ultimate voting machine. Anthropic just filed, near $1 trillion. SpaceX is about to go. OpenAI will be right behind it. And what you're trying to get through what is usually a fairly narrow window is $3.5 trillion in AI companies. Not a single one of them profitable, and they're all trying to go public quickly. There's a pretty famous professor in New York, Scott Galloway, and he basically said yesterday that he thinks that all of these things are in for a massive correction, 50 to 70%. He thinks the smartest people in the room are effectively saying, we've taken this as far as we can. Now we need to sell it to someone else. The public is the buyer of last resort. So we're going to start there. We're going to shift into a little bit of vibes, I guess we might call it. Mood's definitely shifting. College graduates are booing AI at commencement, which is, I think, totally humorous because they spent 4 years using ChatGPT to do their homework, and now they're booing the guys talking about ChatGPT. At least two. Yes, exactly.
At least two. The next one's going to do the 4. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're seeing a lot of data center projects being, the kibosh is being put on them. You have Aaron Brockovich out there, trying to sign people up to make sure that there's no new data centers around. And Bernie Sanders is out there saying that 50% of all of these AI companies should belong to the U.S. government. That is an interesting mood shift. So we're gonna go there. And then I think the last bit, which is all part and parcel of the really the first one, is that open source models just continue to grow from underneath. They're cheaper, they're fast. And, quite frankly, they're 80 to 90% as good as the frontier models in many cases, and certainly for the workloads that people need them for. So the very product that these $3.5 trillion companies are trying to sell you is getting commoditized, and the prospectus is not even cold there. So, we're not Scott Galloway. I think we're going to try to tie it all together and say, we're not saying AI is bad. We're not going to say AI is going to crash. In fact, we're full believers the other way. Just as the dot-com crash didn't kill the internet, it sort of sorted out the Amazons from the pets.com. And that's, I think, the correction we want to talk about and the tension that we're going to talk about. We're talking about a repricing, not an extinction. So, with that, why don't we get into the first segment here, which is really this sort of $3.5 trillion question. You have 3 of the largest frontier companies, Anthropic, OpenAI, SpaceX. They're all marching toward the public markets. As we said, $3.5 trillion of valuation. Not a single one of them is profitable. How does this work? Galloway would tell you that it doesn't. It just doesn't work. And I would tell you from an investor standpoint, before I'll throw it over to you, that venture capital is very much a voting machine. There's a lot of social proof in venture capital. Nobody wants to be alone and wrong. If something is working, there is literally no price high enough that you can pay in order to get into it, because you have to be in the winners, because there are so few relative to the total number of bets that you're making. And so you sort of look at this and you say, okay, let's take a look at it. Let's see. Can this can you get 3 large IPOs through a window where they are literally changing the rules on the stock exchanges, where they're literally changing the rules on the index funds, where they're literally changing the rules at Fidelity in order to allow people to buy this stuff? I mean, is this the last gasp, or
Hmm.
or is this just the beginning? So let me throw it back to you and see what you think, Anthony.
I mean, so like I don't know. Like some of those questions you asked, I think we could get into it, whether it's the last gasp. I listen to Scott Galloway. I listened to him a lot more in the past than I do now, and I'm sure his talking points are really eloquent and sounds like totally take those to the bank. Um,
Right.
but I think whether Anthropic and OpenAI and SpaceX are profitable businesses, I kind of will like say I'm not sure what their finances are. I'm not looking at their filing documents. What I would say is I think that they have I think OpenAI and Anthropic have really great products, and they've excited the market and people use them all the time. And I think that it will be really hard for the consumer as well as sort of the sort of like prosumer and also the sort of IT organizations to sort of back away from those in fast measure. Um, so I think they're going to be valuable companies, and I think they might get repriced. You know what I mean? You're saying Scott Galloway's saying, uh, but I just look at the fundamentals. They're great products. I think once you start using them, they're almost products that you don't want to live without. And we saw this with Google, and I think that a lot of people who are probably can't even remember when Google went public. I mean, there was no high-speed internet, and there was no ad business at all. And there were like 9 search engines in market.
Yeah.
And Google stuck to their guns, and high-speed internet access became a reality, and they bought Applied Semantics and built an ad business. And now, I mean, Harry, you might know better than I do, they're doing 30 or 40 billion dollars a quarter, and all of that revenue never existed. Like the ad business was not on the internet. And now it's a fundamental system. So
Yes.
I don't know where Scott Galloway is on all this. I just think that we're we are we have to. I look at the sort of technology that's on the table today, like I did when I looked at the internet, and just said it's a fundamental shift. Everyone's going to use this. It's going to happen. I think we're right there, and I think these companies are both. Look, I'm less excited about OpenAI because of just the sort of Sam Altman controversies, but I think technically they have a great product. You know what I mean? And I have my reservations about Anthropic, but ultimately they have a good product. We use it. We're also not mentioning at all that Google also has great products, and they're raising money its different way. But I actually think that Google could also end up running the table on both of those companies. Do you know what I mean? But we're not moving away, I think, as a society from buying tokens whether we're buying open source tokens or we're buying Anthropic tokens.
Yeah.
So I don't know how
Look,
you price
I'm
that. I don't
gonna.
know how Wall Street prices it.
Right. Wall Street prices everything, the same ultimately, which is what is the ultimate, steady state cash flow that you can generate out of this business, and how long can you do that for? And then you throw in the interest rates over a period of time, and or the expected return over the period of time, and it's just sort of a discounted cash flow. Everything kind of runs down to that. So I'll do the quick math for you, right? Which
Hmm.
is that Anthropic is going to go public. They have a $47 billion run rate of revenue. And let's just say it's close enough. Let's just call it a $1 trillion valuation. If you want to generate, call it 20% returns over a couple of years, that needs to turn into a $2 trillion valuation. In order for a company to sustain, let's say, a $2 trillion valuation, you ultimately probably need something like $100 billion of free cash flow. There are very few companies that have, a higher than 25% free cash flow margin. So let's just be really optimistic and say they do that. They need $400 billion of revenue, and they probably need $500 billion of revenue between all the CapEx and everything else. So
that's a
so
10x.
the
You're saying they have to
see,
do 10x.
yeah, they have to 10x their revenue, in order to justify today's price. You have to believe that they're going to 10x their revenue after them 10 to 15x their revenue over the last, year or two. Now, the company didn't exist 5 years ago, right? I mean, or barely existed 5 years ago. So, they've gone from 0 to almost 50 billion, and now you have to make the bet that they're going to 500 billion. You always
But
talk about numerators and denominators. Denominator being is the pie growing, is the number of use cases getting larger. Numerator being the how much people are spending on those use cases. And I think that we have one phenomenal use case for AI, which is programming, and coding,
software development.
and that's where all software development. That's where all the revenue is coming from. These days. And there's literally an insatiable amount of token demand to some degree, because all businesses are arbitrages, right? I will spend all of my money on tokens if the return that I get from spending my money on tokens is greater than the cost of those tokens.
So I got a question for you.
So yeah, go.
I got a question for you. So so just taking Anthropic, not they're at 50 billion, and the question is like, can they 10x or 15x that to get to 500 billion, considering the prices stay constant? The question really to me is that in that numerator is there going to be 10 to 15 or 20 or 30% more demand from consumers and professionals for intelligence? And can they gobble up that? And I guess what I say is, let's go back to 94, 95, 96 when the internet was just starting. Could anyone believe that there's going to be, 100 or 1,000x more demand for internet in 95, 96, 97? Do you know what I mean? And I think that, maybe I take a counter argument to Galloway. It's like, I think that there's going to be easily 100x to 1,000x more demand for tokens. Therefore, if that's the denominators growing, can Anthropic take their percentage and grow? And I think it's absolutely possible. I do not think that we're not going to have a society of modern businesses that are not going to have these intelligence systems plugged into it. Right now, you just said coding's the first one. The reason why coding's the first one is the coders are early adopters. They generally see where the puck is going before everyone else. And I'm saying Anthropic's is not a red herring. It's actually a canary in the coal mine. It's saying, we're going to go here. We're going here.
Yeah, and I'm going to give you the counter argument to that, which is,
right on.
Can you name the companies that have more than $500 billion in revenue in the world today?
No,
you can't, right?
I can't,
because it's you actually you can, the top two, and you've shopped there, right? Amazon and Walmart. Amazon just surpassed Walmart, and they're up in this like the 700 billion, 600, 700 billion dollar range, and then like the state grid of China or something like that is is like the next company, and so it is I mean, it's just. But, that's the largest utility provider in the world. So I'm just saying that when you're thinking about these things, you're literally saying these are software tools. Effectively, they're software, right? They're delivered on a computer.
Yeah, they're software.
And in order to justify today's pricing, you need to get to $500 billion, and there's only 3 companies on Earth that have got to $500 billion in revenue so far. And then you
Amazon
have to do that
was
not
hated.
only for
But for a long time, remember Amazon, people hated Amazon. They were like, they don't make a profit. They don't do shit. You know what I mean? And now people that have bought Amazon, when people were speculating that their margins are 3 or 4%, that they're going to be stuck with a a nothing burger. I mean, I think people are looking back and going like, no. So I think,
but I'm going to put it in your terms though.
yeah.
If you think about the numerator, Amazon started by selling books, and they started to sell CDs, and then they started to sell bath towels, whatever else they sold.
Everything.
And then they started this, AWS business. And,
ad business.
and I think that's when, people really got down on them when they basically said, we're going to just keep spending on the AWS business and there's no return in sight. And then all of a sudden there was, it flipped and there was a return in sight. I think the issue is simply that they sell physical goods and they sell digital goods, and therefore they are able to sell, an enormous amount of the number of people that they can touch that will spend a lot of money on them is almost infinite. It's all of you, it's every consumer in America could buy something on Amazon. I can't even imagine that there's someone who can't buy. I think there's lots of people that will not spend a ton of money on AI simply because they don't have the use case for it outside of replacing Google. I think people are still using it that way. I'm not trying to be negative because look, you could pry, Claude from my cold dead hand, right? I mean, at this point,
no, I know
it
you're
is,
just
it is something that like, and I'm not even trying to be argumentative. I'm just saying that if I have trouble making the case for one of the companies, then if you have to make it for 3 of the companies, I would not want to be the third company through the IPO window. I think that if you're SpaceX, it's a fundamentally different story because you're not really saying that I'm going to be selling intelligence or inference. I may just be selling cloud services, and it's not just cloud services. It's really cloud services. It's above the cloud services.
Yeah, they're putting the cloud in the cloud.
It's they're putting it over the cloud. And like we've said, Elon's the only one who can do that. The only other guy who could do it had his rocket blow up on the pad the other day. Rockets are hard, to quote Elon. Horrible. But
you're talking about
that's
3
a different business.
Yeah, but you're talking about the general IPO market. Can it swallow these 3 companies within like the next 100 days? And can those values hold? So, because you'd said in the cold open, like there's a lot of people that are going to be, the public's the buyer of the last resort. Can you buy at the price that's going to that they're going to open at, and will it hold? Because after all the employees sell, will it drop? And then maybe Galloway's right, and maybe it drops back down. But like, oh, hey, 5, 6, 7 years out, it turns out like it's a great thing to own. Just like I owned Facebook when it first launched. It was a dog. It was like opened it at here, it dropped down to here, and now if you just would have just held your money in there, it'd have been worth a lot. So I don't know where they in the short window. I don't know if I don't know if the market can hold like what you're saying, 3 big public offerings. Who's going to stick around? I don't know. I mean, I think that SpaceX is an anomaly. I think, and they're the only one that can like kind of put stuff in the air in space.
Yeah,
and I think increasingly, I think that's going to be a product that businesses are going to buy into rather than consumers. But they also have a lot of they have their data centers. So I don't know about all of this. So that's why I'm saying I don't know about that finance layer. But what I do know is like, hey, are you going to need more satellites in space to operate your business and your phone and your internet access? Probably yes. Are you going to need more intelligence software? Probably yes. So if those are yeses, then the weighing machine kicks
we'll get
in.
to that. Right, and I think we'll get to that in the third segment, which is are these the companies that you're going to be buying those intelligence services from, or are you going to be getting it from an open source Chinese model? And and that hurts. But I would look. I do understand the financial aspects of it. Right, I've spent the whole career doing finance, so I get that part of it really well. And the truth of the matter is that and this is why I said I wouldn't want to be the third guy through the window. Is that I agree with pretty much everything you said, which is these companies are absolutely world-changing companies. AI is a world-changing technology, or computer science, whatever technology, we'll just call it. It's going to be the standard from here on out for the rest of our lives and for our children's lives, and then maybe the next thing comes along. So I don't think there's any doubt about that. But what we've seen is that it's incredibly capital intensive. And if you go from if you need, let's say, $300 billion to build it out, if you're a single company and you need that much in compute, because you do need those data centers in order to go from the revenue today, let's just call it the $50 billion of Anthropic revenue. If you need to get it to 500 billion, your existing compute is not going to do it. You're going to need more of it, a lot more of it. And that's going to be incredibly expensive. And if your market cap all of a sudden and your valuation drops from $1 billion to, say, 300 billion, and you all of a sudden need 300 billion to service your demand, well, then you're stuck in a bind where it becomes ever more difficult to raise money because of the dilution that you suffer all the time, and you're going to keep suffering. It's sort of a prisoner's dilemma in that regard. It's like if you're successful, you have to dilute people more, and therefore your stock goes down more, which means that you have to dilute more. And it's sort of the old convertible death spiral. And that's the difficult part. So you need to actually start to generate free cash flow well before you need all the money. I mean, remember, Google, filed to sell $80 billion worth of stock. Google hasn't sold a share of stock since it went public effectively.
So it's going to go down
20
in
years
price,
ago.
do you think? Does that mean
Well,
it goes?
no, I mean, Google already has a value of, multi-trillion dollars, and it has a super highly profitable business that throws off a ton of cash. So, Google's not going to go down very much on that. And, and Berkshire Hathaway, i.e. Warren Buffett, although Buffett retired, his proteges, committed 10 billion of that. So that's a pretty strong signal. But I think what it shows, though, is simply that even the guys with the fortress balance sheet and the businesses that are profitable understand that this is an incredibly capital-intensive game that they're playing. And it's a game that once you're in it, you have to play it to the end. There's no stepping away from it and saying, hey, I'm just not going to do it. You can be Zuckerberg and you can say, hey, I lost $100 billion on the metasphere and I'm going to move away from it. But once you get down into the AI business, you gotta go, or you're just out of the business. There's no getting back into it.
I think, yeah. Google's
and you got to remember, Google's going to be in it. Of course, they're going to be in it. It makes sense for them to be in it. And remember,
they're going to be
Google
in it.
They spent the last bunch of years buying back $70 billion worth of stock. So they were in the market. They basically said, we think our stock's cheap. We have nothing better to do with our money. We have no better place to invest our money. And so we're going to spend $70 billion buying it back. And now they're saying, we actually have a real need for that money. God, I wish we had that cash back. We need $80 billion because to compete in this market means that we need that level of capital to build more data centers, to build more GPUs, to roll out more of these products. And like you, I use Gemini probably every day. I use Claude. I would say I use Claude every day, and I use Gemini almost every day. And
Same.
it is actually, you know what? I'm going to say it clearly. We use Gemini every day because we score all our articles in our workflows using Gemini every day.
Image
so we use
making,
Gemini every day.
everything. Yeah.
And all of our images come through Gemini's image generation. That's correct. So so we use that combination every day, and then we occasionally go to one of the other models. So they're gonna be there. Look, I don't know how much more we can beat this one. I just think that it's a really interesting question, which is can the market sustain and fund three companies at this level in the public where the scrutiny is higher and where people are trading your stock as opposed to being forced to hold your stock, which is where the early investors are, and knowing that the early investors at some point will probably want to get out, and the employees will probably want to take a bunch of money off the table. So you have a wide variety of you know uh, folks who will want to take cash off, knowing how much they've made from the beginning,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
you're
I
going
think
to
I
do
think
that.
I think they will. I mean, it makes perfect sense. They've
Yeah,
invested their money and they want a liquidity event. And I think Galloway's basically says, like, when these companies go public, it's effectively saying the smartest people in the room are saying, we've squeezed as much as we can. Now we need to find someone else to sell it to at this price. And that's the
yeah,
public.
and there was a great, and I wish we could throw it up there, and I mean, I don't know how to do it, and or I should say I don't have it in front of me, but there's a great chart which shows like a whole bunch of tech IPOs, and it shows the drawdown from the top to the bottom, and like almost every one of these companies has this cycle in the public markets where they start out and they go up and they go down, and basically from the top to the bottom, within a pretty short period of time on IPO, it's been like 50 or 60%. So not, so you could say Galloway makes a lot of headlines by saying it's 50% down, but truth of the matter
Well,
is he's just quoting statistics to some
he's
degree.
selling ads too, by the
And
way.
I,
So,
yeah,
so
of course, yeah, yeah, no,
so
he's a great marketer of himself.
yeah,
Um,
he's a
and
champ at that.
Yeah, but I also think that there is a, there's a we have, none of this happens in a vacuum, right? So, the capital markets are a strong signal, all right, but it's not the only signal.
That's right.
And you really have to look at the whole environment around what's going on to really get the mood. And so I'd like to, if we can, just start talking about some of the AI backlash that these companies are seeing. And I mean, there's clearly there's clearly some
I mean,
serious backlash, like we said in the opening. There's data center fights. You got Aaron Brockovich in there. I can't think of Aaron Brockovich without
Bernie
thinking of Julia
Sanders.
Roberts. He's got, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean,
Eh,
Bernie's always there, right? He's the voice of outrage on anything that seems to be working. He just wants to make sure that it doesn't work. We should all work in a mitten factory, as far as he's concerned. Just building red mittens. But there's lots of politics. There's worries about jobs. Those worries are, I would say, overblown today. We've talked about it, overblown today, but longer term, I think they're reasonable worries. That the job you're doing today may not be the job you're doing in 5 years, and that's scary to people. Um, and so let's sort of
yeah,
dig in a little bit there.
let's dig in on the backlash. I mean, the backlash is real, right? I mean, there's people that don't want data centers in their backyards. I mean, I get it. I wouldn't want one either. But they have to go somewhere. So I think it's perfectly fine to have communities say we don't really want a big data center in our backyard. Like they also don't want warehouses either. You know what I mean? Like they don't want trucks rolling through their neighborhoods. So I think that
I have effectively no cell phone service at my house because, while I live in a beautiful neighborhood, I am blessed beyond belief to live where I live. NIMBYism is real, right? And so everyone wants the cell service. Nobody wants the cell tower. Everyone wants AI. No one wants the data center.
right.
The
Well,
the students, boo, Eric Schmidt, but they use ChatGPT to graduate. So there's a level of sort of it's ironic, right? It's you could call it hypocrisy, but that's probably too mean a term. It's just more of a disconnect
it's humans.
between what people. Yeah, that's
humans
right. That's
wanna,
exactly right.
Humans want to like eat gluttonous food and like gain no weight. You know what I mean? It's like this is where
I recommend Zepbound.
Yeah, Zepbound. So there's the backlash is really the fault of the AI companies in a way as well, right? They also went out and said, hey, there's a 20% chance that this whole thing could kill everybody on Earth. Like that's straight out of people's Sam Altman's mouth. You know
Sure.
what I mean? They also went out and said, Dario's out there saying, look, this could like take every white collar job. Like, so th- they were obviously going for a strategy there to like get the government to regulate where the regulation would let them control so they could block out everybody else. They could block the Chinese models. Like if they actually went and regulated it, they would say, oh, look, we're the only 5 or 6 guys that can do all this and we have regulatory capture. So they pooped in the pool, right?
Yep.
Because it made logical sense. The NIMBYism is there no matter what. Either in cell towers, roads, warehouses. That's just happening. No, and so the mood is there because it's there. But let's get to the college students because I think that's an interesting place. I think the college my belief is the college students booed Eric Schmidt because he's just a rich boomer. So no one likes the guy anyways, right? So you're a college student, you're just like, yeah, boo. But they also use ChatGPT on campus to get work done. And they kind of actually saw how utterly amazing it was. And they were like, and I think that they said, wow, this is so good. I'm not even that good. I'm not that, I can't write an essay as well as this thing is writing my essay. And they know instinctually going into the workplace that they're going to be compared to AI. You're just like, it's like me playing against LeBron James. I'm 5'4" on a good day. You know what I mean? I'm not nearly as athletic. And that's what ChatGPT's feeling to these kids. They're like, how am I going to compete with this? It's just, that's really scary, period.
Yeah. And it's a failing of, I'm going to say it's a failing of education on the part of everybody here. And you can throw parents in there too, right? Because you have some control when your kids are under your roof. And it really is, you're not competing with LeBron James, right? LeBron James is on your team and you're paying him $20 a month. I mean, that's the reality. You can learn anything. You can learn everything. You can harness LeBron's skills and you can dunk on everybody who's not harnessing LeBron's skills all day, every day. You can be the smartest kid on any given subject relative to the other folks simply because they're not going to do the work. They're going to just say, this thing's just smarter than me. Well, guess what? If you don't prompt it, it's not very smart, right? If you just let it sit there with a window open, it doesn't do anything intelligent on its own. It only does intelligent stuff when you tell it to do intelligent stuff. Therefore, you're in control of it. It's sort of like, having so you could be like, I'd say like, let's say my wife who is, 5'2" on a good day, right? But if we had a giant pit bull, she's all of a sudden 12 feet tall and she doesn't have to worry about walking alone in the woods because she has a guard dog that's going to take care of her, right? Or she can walk around with me, who's bigger than average, right?
It's the failure of education. And what's interesting, Harry, that you said that is like, think about look, I don't want to give educators a pass here, but this is kind of like really their second year of realizing how powerful AI is going to be. And educators are they're not agile. Those guys aren't, I think major institutions are going to basically never shift. And I think, if Scott Galloway was on our podcast right now, I'd be like, hey, Scott, educating institutions, I would short their stock big time because I think they could become really irrelevant if you had groups of training systems that used AI to really get kids ready. So I think they're booing because they're pissed that they're seeing this AI that they're going to have to. You're right. Maybe they're not competing. They haven't realized LeBron's on their team for $20 a month, but it's just like there's a feeling, and feelings aren't fact all the time, but there's a feeling that they're competing with it, right?
Yes.
And I think
and in the job workplace they are, to some degree, because
they are in some degree they are.
I mean, look at what Dara said at Uber the other day. We blew through our AI token budget. So what am I doing? Am I slowing down AI? No, I'm not slowing down AI. I'm just not hiring people. I mean, that's what he
Yeah.
said effectively.
Yeah,
So,
and that's
I mean,
across
so
the
yeah,
board. That's across the board. So I
yes,
think the college students have a reason to boo. I think that their parents and their educators and technology has moved really has it's just the playing field has shifted and they're not prepared, and no one's really helping them. So I want to
yeah,
give the college students a much better pass on this stuff than but the NIMBYism. Look, if we don't get enough, like, look, our U.S. power grid system is not good enough. We need more power. Period. Whether we're building one more data center or not, the U.S. government has not been good stewards of understanding how to deliver great power for us, and the
no,
data centers are demanding new power. And if that puts pressure on a way to like deliver better power for the country, I think it's great news. I understand that you don't want it in your backyard. So we need, and that leads us to like maybe Elon's right. Maybe you put them in the sky. Maybe data centers in the sky are actually really work. That's so. Um,
yeah.
I also think that the
Look,
boos. Just one last thing. I think that the general boos are also on the market economics in general, meaning, hey, you're going to put these big data centers in here. That all that value is going to accrue to 10 executives, 100 executives, and we're going to be left with this massive industrial complex in and around our neighborhoods, and we're not going to get. There's no real value for us capture, and where you hear Bernie Sanders saying like, well, we should have a wealth fund and we should own 50% of these companies. I think that's totally socialism. But I'm not against the notion that if your community is putting in a data center for Anthropic or for Amazon or for anyone, it's like, it's very American and very entrepreneurial to say, give me a piece of it. Let us have some of the upside.
right,
I think
yeah,
that's fine. Negotiate it.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I mean, there's some bunch of interesting data points here, right? Like 7 of 10 people oppose data centers being built. You've had $41
That's
billion
Gallup.
dollars of yeah, investment blocked, um, or delayed. $64 billion worth, delayed or blocked,
I
and it's
watched the
bipartisan.
interview. Did you see the interview with that investor from Shark Tank? I forgot his name.
Yeah, yeah, Kevin O'Leary.
Yeah, I saw the interview. I think it was I think I saw a clip. Maybe he was talking to Tucker Carlson or something. I saw it on YouTube. And look, if I'm a member of a community and I'm seeing Shark Tank guy basically talk the way he did about his business, I'm blocking him. It was just tone deaf to the citizens that are going to end
Yeah,
up getting this. So if this segment's about vibes, that guy, the AI companies pooped in the pool, and then Kevin O'Leary did too. It just
yeah.
left me going like, yeah, I don't want that guy to build a data center in my neighborhood. You
Look,
know what I mean?
I think you have, I think you hit on a good point, and this, this really gets at the vibes side, right? Which is students are coming out of college. They have the opportunity to, have LeBron on their team, right? They have the use of these tools, but at the same time, those tools are sort of hollowing out their entry level jobs. They are maybe $100,000 in student debt coming out. They were promised that if they were good high school students and they got a degree from a decent place, that they would have a good life. And it's turning out to be false. Um, College costs have spiraled out of control ever since the government decided to back student loans pretty much unequivocally with like no questions asked. You can never discharge those debts, not even in personal bankruptcy. So there's a lot of anger that comes out of that, and it manifests in guys like Bernie Sanders. It manifests in guys like senators or congressmen like AOC. It manifests in people like the current mayor of New York City, in Mamdani, where he gets the youth vote out who are effectively disaffected, and tells them that he's going to make it better. Now, I think we would both argue that they're just using the anger to gain power themselves, and there's no chance they're going to actually do any of that stuff. But it doesn't. We're not here to debate socialism. It doesn't really matter, right? The fact of the matter is that they're
The
booing
vibes are
Scooter
the
Braun,
vibes.
who used.
Yeah.
Yeah, the vibes are the vibes. They're booing Scooter Braun, who used to own, Taylor Swift's catalog, and maybe they're booing him because of that.
It wasn't
Either
Scooter
they don't
Braun
like
though, that
Taylor,
they were
or
booing. It was a different guy. It was
no,
a different guy.
they booed
Him too?
Scott Borchetta. Sorry,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, Scott Borchetta, who owned Big Machine,
Yeah.
and they'd boo Scooter also.
Yeah.
Any rate, and he just sort of stopped his speech and said, "Listen, this is
Deal
just
with it.
reality. Deal with it."
Yeah.
And they booed him
It's very
harder
adult.
as a
A
result.
very adult way of
Yeah,
telling the kids. Yeah.
they don't want to deal with it, right? It's like that's not what they were promised. They were promised something better. So the
Yeah.
vibes are the vibes, and the politicians are going to use those vibes to to do what they do, right? Which is to get more followers effectively.
Yeah. I mean,
And
I
the fact
think
that it's
I think
non-bipartisan is the really scary thing. And look, you can, I think part of, again, why we started this podcast, part of, the stuff that we tend to do is, look at the world and say, um, we, uh, we really have seen a lot of stuff, and a lot of things, it may not be the same, but they, it kind of rhymes or it looks similar. And, you can go back in history and look at wealth concentration, and it doesn't end well. There
yeah.
has
Well,
to
like the
be,
yeah.
you can't take away hope from people. And I think that's the way that a lot of these students are feeling, is that they don't really have hope for a great life given what's going on. And then they see, Elon Musk's a trillionaire.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And
I
you
think
sort of
there's
look
the,
at
the, the
and
dichotomy of like
it's
you have all these kids, which I think they, it's a real bummer that they have like a no hope. I find that to be, especially sad to hear, and whether it's true or not. But uh, if their hope is low and the valuations are peaking, that's a problem. Like that sort of that's the disparity, I think, is the problem. So, the social mood
there's
is
yeah.
changing. It's from our research, it's not red against blue. It's people are in the middle here are saying, hey, this starting to suck. And so
Yeah, well, it's the AI haves and it's the AI have nots, and I think there are people who have skill sets that work well with I think it really works well with the with what's going on in AI. As you know, I have a daughter works in interior design, and her first job out of college, she generated something like 20 or 25 different GPTs that she used with ChatGPT to do her job better. People with agency, people who are willing to put in that work and try to figure out workflows that work for them, are going to be at an enormous advantage. People who got in early on these companies are at an enormous advantage. They have built generational wealth in 2 years, in 3 years. It's basically like you have probably,
lottery. They
I'm
won
going to
the
say,
lottery.
10,000 lottery winners. Yeah, that's exactly where I was going.
Yeah.
It's like you probably have 10,000 lottery winners, and some of them are now small governments themselves. And then you have literally everybody else. So, my other daughter, as you know, lives in San Francisco. She's she's got a master's degree in aerospace engineering, works at a big company, works at Lockheed Martin, builds satellites. Her boyfriend, who she lives with, is a chemical engineer, helps run a very large plant that does diesel fuel and jet fuel made out of sustainable, basically biofuels. The
No
two of them
lottery tickets
together.
there. Yeah.
Right. There's, I mean, they're working. They haven't hit the lottery. They're not going to. They work for large corporations
Yeah. There's
already,
no lottery.
and they look at life and they're like, we'll never be able to buy a house in San Francisco. They're gonna, there's gonna be 7,000 people that are, that have $20 million each. all of them looking for houses in and around here. And that's just, from like 2 or 3 companies, and then you add up everything else. You're like, yeah, if we want to live here, which they do, and their jobs are there, like, we're just gonna have to rent crappy apartments as long as we want to be here. And that's sad, right? Like,
I mean, that's
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 not,
that adds to the negative vibes, and that negative vibe
yeah,
may accrue to AI. And by the way, there's millions of people in your daughter's world where they have great jobs and they're providing real great benefit to society by doing those great jobs, and there's 0 lottery tickets. And I think when you look at a community where there's like, hey, I'm doing a great job, highly technical, no lottery ticket, and then this guy over here who might be like doing frankly very little at an Anthropic and they're getting a lottery ticket, it creates bad vibes. And I
yeah,
think that's
and and,
where
and
the bad vibes are coming from. It's like
yeah,
it sucks for a
absolutely.
lot of
And
people.
if and I look at that and I say, like, if my daughter and her boyfriend are feeling that, right, and these are people who are, by any measure, incredibly well off. They have great jobs. They make lots of money, doing those jobs, relative to the average person in America. Um, and they're feeling kind of screwed. I mean, how does the average person, how does the average voter, feel? Um, and it's a lot worse, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot worse.
Uh, yeah, so
So
the other
anyway,
before we close out this segment, I think there's another vibe note that's sort of latent in the space. I was very active in creating the social media space back in the early 2000s, and we really didn't know how insidious it was going to be. Um, and I feel like we're living in the world of we live in a world of social media as a control plane in our lives. And if you have to be very media literate to understand what's fake or what's not, and how to really just deal with social media, I feel a lot of people are saying, "Oh my God, this AI thing's coming, and it's also going to have another layer of control plane on us that we can't put our finger on in a social way, but it's going to happen, right?" And you can't really put it.
yeah,
You can't. No one can really say, "Oh," but at some point, someone's going to own the models. These people are going to own the models, and they're going to own what intelligence means and how it's and everyone knows that, "Oh, I'm going to be underneath that." So the way out of that, which is the next segment, is there's a whole open source world of models. They're gonna arrive and um and compete and thrive. And what I think a lot of people that are listening to this podcast don't understand is that the it's imperative that we have an open source AI economy in order for us to sort of offer a counterbalance to the incumbent IPO technology companies. And some of the best AI is coming out of China, some of open source, and some of the uh, Google awful Google also offers open source. Meta is competing on the open source stuff as well because um, they need to. They don't really have a product that can offer anyone anything else. So open source is going to be something I think could offer good vibes here and good opportunities for people, because I think that's an important
yeah.
technical point.
You went kind of Mr. Roboto on me there for a second.
Yeah, yeah, it's
So
okay.
um,
We're gonna be fine. My point is that
yeah.
open source.
We may have to cut this one in since Anthony has disappeared.
I'm back.
You're back. There we go.
I'm back. So we'll just catch up. I think open source is going to thrive. It's traditionally happened in tech, especially with new tech. And if it wasn't for open source, you probably wouldn't even have AWS. So I think it should be considered a mood. It should change the vibe that we actually have open source.
Yeah, I look at open source and I just say, you use the best tool for the job. The most cost effective tool, best being a relative value term. But if I have a question about I have a headache, I don't need to go to the best neurosurgeon in the world to ask them, whether I need some aspirin, right? And if I need to go to the store, I don't need the world's most expensive car to get there. I can take a Yugo and it will get me there and back.
Yeah.
If anyone remembers a Yugo. So, the truth of the matter is that as companies blow through these token budgets, as they realize that a lot of their work and a lot of their workflow that they're creating is not necessarily stuff that you need Claude Opus 4.8 for. You can use Haiku or you can use DeepSeek for. You will start to see these sort of intelligent harnesses get created where they're going to route jobs to stuff that's literally sitting on your computer itself and not going out over the internet at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's I run a bunch of local models on my M5 Mac, and it works. It works great. It's not as polished as Anthropic, but it gets the job done. Like if you wanted to summarize something that your professor gave you, or you want to write, make your email sound better, you don't need to use any sort of commercial model. You could use an open source model. And I think that Apple's going to want you to have an open source model on their phones. I think that Meta's going to go after it. I think China's going to go after it. So there's going to be,
I mean, Google just dropped Gemma, right? Yesterday, Gemma 4.
Yeah, and that costs, by the way, them, millions of dollars to make.
Yes.
Right. But if you think about it, if you want to put, like, if you're Google, and you're like, hey, developers, here's a really amazing open source model. Use this. What does that do to Anthropic? Anthropic can't really publish an open source model. They have to pay for every token. But if you get an open source model, this is for the average listener. An open source model means that you can download the model onto your computer and run it locally. That means that you're really paying no one for the tokens you're putting in and getting out. So if you're a business, and you want to run, and you're doing, I don't know, let's say you're summarizing reports that are coming in from your field associates, and you're like, hey, I can't afford to spend, $1,000 a month on Anthropic or OpenAI. You can take Google's model, install it on a computer, buy a Mac Mini, and you can process it all locally, and you're not going to spend any. You're going to spend one-time costs on your Mac Mini and the power, and you're going to run this model. It's eventually those will be in cloud containers that you pay maybe $10 a month for, or $30 a month for. So that is coming. It's already here. Frankly, it's already here, and you can use it. And good developers are already moving to a system in which they write an intelligent little dispatcher that says, hey, when I want to talk to the most expensive model in the world, go to Anthropic, spend the money, but on all this basic stuff, just go to my open source model that's over here. And that's, an advisor or dispatch pattern. Most developers know it, and they're using it.
Yeah. I look at our own workflow at when we put together Co-AI and the reports daily. And, right now we are going to Gemini to score a bunch of articles. We get 400, 500 articles a day and we score them all. And then that's how we, kind of build up our themes. And that's how we end up writing, writing pieces every day. But, I've thought about this a lot, which is, that inference cost that we spend on Gemini could easily be sent to Gemma. Could easily be sent.
And we will.
And we will at some point. Right now, it doesn't make any sense because we have enough Google credits. But At some point, those will run out, and we'll sit there and go, yeah, actually, you know what? I can spend some money on the images, and maybe there's a better open source image generator at that point. But for the most part, just scoring articles is not that difficult a job, and any good open source model could do it. So let's just pick our favorite and send it there. I think it keeps the frontier labs honest to some degree. I think that you and I'm gonna come all the way back to the first theme, which is the valuations of these things, which is if you have a robust open source market, what you are doing is you're driving the cost of raw intelligence down towards zero. And if you drive the cost of raw intelligence down towards zero, and you are the guy selling tokens on that intelligence, you're selling something that is worth less and less, and you're charging to some degree more and more for it. When most people, they need a Buick, they don't need the Ferrari. And so why am I going to pay for the Ferrari, so to speak, when I just need the Buick? And I think what that does is it really makes you question how those guys can continue to increase revenue at the clip that they've increased it if people all of a sudden look at the non-subsidized bill and say, okay, my Copilot bill was, $300 last month, and now it's $3,000. And I can't do that across my organization. So I'm going to move that. Am I going to use less intelligence? No. I'm going to, I've now built that workflow. You don't go backwards. So I'm just going to find it cheaper. I'm going to find it more efficiently. And I think that's what you're going to see. And that puts a real cap on the revenue possibilities, absent, in your words, increasing the denominator. You need to vastly increase the use cases for AI you have to grow the pie incredibly large.
And the pie is going to grow. It's every market.
It's going to grow, but who's going to take the pie? Is it the guy giving you the tokens for free on your Mac Mini, or is it the guy selling you, $15, per million tokens on Opus 4.8?
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot to unpack there. We're probably not going to have enough time to go there, but the intelligence market right now is largely the coding market, like we talked about. A lot of the revenue right now is how do you augment software development? That's happening. The next big markets: finance, film and television, medical. Those are $1 trillion industries. They'll all go through some sort of AI transformation, and it will be a mixture of like really, really great models that are sold to you by the Anthropics of the world, and there'll be stuff that will be running on your local desktop. That is just going to happen. And Apple is, I think, going to be another. I'm long on Apple, not just because I like the product, but I think that their chips and their phones are going to have AI baked into them, and it will be an open source model. So the pie is going to grow, period. And the expensive model producers are going to grow along with it, and they're going to compete with open source models. The open source, but when we say, hey, you can use open source, the costs shift, right? What is that? What do I mean by the cost shift? You can buy Anthropic, and you can string it together, and you're going to get a great outcome. You're going to go use an open source system. You actually have to provision cloud computing. That means you're going to have people that you're going to have to pay to do that, and then you're going to operate it, which means there's going to be people. So the costs shift. The tokens on themselves may be, quote, free, Harry, but you're actually supporting that with a team, probably of 3-6 people. So you have to figure that into your total cost, and you're going to be using your own compute. That compute might cost you one-time cost of 20 or 50 grand, or you're buying it in the cloud from Amazon or Cloudflare, and that's going to cost you. So there's no free tokens, period. You could run it on your laptop, but your laptop costs money and your time. So there's some free, But like industrial scale AI tokens are not free, and they're not going to be free from open source. They're just going to be cheaper.
Right. Yeah, I got no argument about that. I guess I would just yeah. I mean, I guess I'd just say that.
But
It is,
you wrote a piece about a law firm that I think
yeah,
everyone should go read.
yeah. I mean, look, Kirkland and Ellis, one of the largest law firms, by revenue, by profitability, has does 11 billion in revenue, 6 billion in profits. It's an incredibly profitable business. Um, its costs are people and office space, right? So they have said that they are going to build their own version of a legal AI tool for themselves, that they're willing to spend up to $500 million on this tool. And you sort of look at that and go, okay, that's interesting. Harvey's an $11 billion valuation company. Lagora's $5.5 billion. These guys have raised, close on $1 billion to get there. And interestingly, one of the founders of Harvey was actually on X the other day talking about what they're doing and where they're going. And I actually asked him a question. He responded, and he basically said that, look, we want to be the guys who put the if Kirkland and Ellis is number one, and you probably have about 20 or 25 of these guys that could build their own, below 25 to 125 or 250, like there's a large number of law firms that are not going to build their own, and Harvey is sitting there going, yeah, we'll build it for you. And Harvey was originally a sort of a wrapper around Claude, and now they've realized that they're actually getting charged by Claude, so they're like, hey, we got to get off that. And they're and they've very publicly said, we're now moving to open source models for a lot of this stuff, and then we're putting our models together, and we're going to help the next group of companies do that. But I think the real point of it is, when intelligence becomes free or close to free, what matters is your domain expertise.
Correct.
And your ability to harness that domain expertise and make it usable for everyone in your organization. And that's really, kind of the promise of AI, one level down. At first it was, hey, AGI, and we're going to give all this information to everybody. And what you realize is that, people are making cat videos, cats busting in, playing musical instruments at night. And that's
very entertaining.
Yeah, it's very entertaining. I laugh every time. But it's not going to change the world. If the cat videos disappeared tomorrow, you'd be like, yeah, well, okay, what's next? Like it's not like I can't live without it. But if you're a corporation, and you have a history and years of experience, and tied up in your people, and those people walk out the door at night, and those people walk out the door and retire, and you have to train new ones, you're losing an incredibly valuable asset. It's sort of like when you die, your brain goes off, and all those experiences. It's like Rutger Hauer, at the in the Blade Runner. I've seen things you cannot imagine. I've seen fire ships off the belt of Orion, et cetera. The whole great speech where he says time to die, and I think all these companies are going to figure out a way to take all of their accumulated knowledge, all their accumulated insight into their industry, and put them into systems that will make the next employee that walks in the door instantly far more usable and smarter, because they will have all of that history. And so, the law firms are a good start on that, but it's not, it'll be doctors, and it'll, like you said, it'll be doctors, and it'll be lawyers, and it'll be accountants, and it'll be every industry.
I mean,
over time.
You'll have an AI system. Let's say it will be multimodal, and it will be open source and closed source, and your own source and your own stuff. And you could basically say, in finance, you could be like, hey, I've looked, here's all the quants I have, here's everything I'm doing. And you could say, what would Paul Tudor Jones do in this success? And you'll have all that data, and you could be like, here's exactly what they do, or here's exactly what the founder would have done. So you'll end up with these very, very specialized systems where an employee can actually talk with the body of data that corporation's had for however long it's been, and that
Yep.
hasn't been readily available to anybody in the corporation. And that would go for a doctor as well. A doctor will be able to say, I have this patient, here's all his information, here's all the information that we have right now on anyone that had that situation. What's the probability of these formulations and this sort of procedure we're going to do? What is the outcomes? It's going to be great. And that's where I think the pie is going to grow. And that's where I want the vibes to change. And I want the opens, like in this whole podcast, we've talked about, these companies are going to be worth it. I think they're going to be worth it. I think the vibes, I think the AI companies did a disservice by pooping in the pool and telling them it's going to wipe out humanity and take all your jobs. The open source community, we need them to build great stuff.
But remember, they were selling stock.
They were selling stock, and they were also getting regulatory capture.
Yeah.
But I'm just generally a net positive on it because I think the technology is going to be very powerful.
Yeah.
But I'm also not.
I'm in that
there's
positive.
going to be downside too. I mean, I'm not.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see a roller coaster in terms of valuations and vibes and everything else. The truth of the matter is that, I mean, I don't know the first thing about Harvey other than that the co-founder tweeted back at me, right? Like, I mean,
we've covered them in the past.
We've covered them. I've seen the billboards, et cetera. I haven't used the product, but here's the thing: I guarantee you this, without knowing a thing about it, Kirkland and Ellis has more knowledge of the law and legal systems and deals and everything that it's doing than Harvey will ever have. And it has it in its building today. And so it makes sense for them to try to sort of consecrate that into an open source model that they control, rather than have to go out. The truth of the matter is that
it's an imperative to me. If I'm a business owner, that's an imperative. That's not nice to have.
For most people, like these LLMs, these frontier models, these they're unbelievable tools that have incredible breadth to them. I mean, just incredible breadth to them. But if you're in the business of selling ground cover plants to municipalities, which a friend of mine is, you don't need breadth. You need depth. And that's where the AI systems that they've built today fail. They don't have depth. They have what someone said in Reddit. And what someone said in Reddit is just not reliable when it comes to, saving lives or something like that, right?
You got to bring your own data.
What's in Medline or a textbook or, anything else. And so you really have to be, I think, incredibly careful when you are using the frontier systems that we have. They just happen to have great front ends on them at this point. They have consumer grade front ends. They're not the greatest, but they're better than anything else. But ultimately, we're going to actually get a combination of real expertise coupled with the humanity that the frontier models bring to the conversation. You actually feel like you're talking to another human in many ways when you speak to these, and they have their sycophancy problems, and they have, they have the same. They have a personality, so to speak. Like, and you talk to them, and you're like, okay, I see the same speech patterns, I see the same, and you notice it, but you don't really notice it when you talk to your friend, right? I said to you earlier before we got on, hey, you use this numerator denominator term. You've been using it for 2 or 3 years. I don't know that I fully get it. Explain it to me again. But that's no different than talking to AI and seeing an M dash, right? Or like, and let me be honest with you here, because your framing is better than mine, which I see from Claude all the time. It's just a personality, right? It's a way of speaking. It's a way of communicating that someone has programmed in there. And it doesn't necessarily evolve. And then a new model shows up and it changes.
Yeah. And just, to kind of wrap this up, as IT organizations and people become more mature with these products, they're going to realize how they can actually change the way everything works. And I think the open source will give you way more power than the closed source ones. And I think what the law firm's doing is the right move. And I think that will happen writ large in every corporation. And you'll see that that it's just will be a fundamentally way of running a business, whether you're a small business or a big business. So
Yeah.
we're coming up to the hour here. I think you wrote some really great newsletters, and I would encourage everyone to go read at least a couple of them at getcoai.com and sign up for the newsletter. Harry's been dropping what we call bangers of analysis, and we're going to keep getting him to do more of it. And we hope the podcast is getting better for you guys. You tell us in the comments. We'll be posting these things up, and
reach, by the way, reach out to us. We're easily findable. So
yes, we are.
Reach out to us anytime if you have a question, comment, idea. Think we're full of shit. Like whatever you have. We're looking to engage. Always enjoy that. So
yep. Join our podcast. We're going to start booking some people to come on here, so it's just not the two of us. We'll be the 3 or the 4 of us. So with that, have a great weekend. I know you're traveling. Safe travels. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much. Yeah, talk to you. Bye.